So now that you've set up your system preferences, it's time to take a look at our optimize parameters. This is where we can set up a few rules that the S2M Center will use when it's taking your part list and placing all the parts onto your sheets of board. You can access this section by selecting the Optimize Parameters option from the top of the sidebar while in the Parts and Materials view. The first tab we'll see is the Patterns tab, and we'll first be asked about our nest type. You'll see two options here, Block and True Shape. Block nesting will take each part in your list and think of it as a block that the actual shape of your part fits inside. And then it'll nest those blocks onto the sheet. It will still cut out the exact shapes, however it'll use these blocks for working out where it can fit them on the sheet. True Shape, on the other hand, allows for S2M to look at the entire shape of the part and finds a much better fit by interlocking those parts together like this. True Shape nesting will nearly always give a better yield, which means a better fit and less waste. However, it'll take a bit longer in the nesting process. Beneath this, you'll see an option for Restrict Rotation for 90 degrees. It will only activate when True Shape is active. This option will decide whether or not parts can be placed on different angles on the sheet like this. Pack Direction will tell S2M which way they should try stacking the sheet. For example, if I nest these 6 shelves, it will know if it should try by default to nest them across the top of the sheet in one row like this, or do 2 rows of 3 down the shorter side of the sheet, like this. You can also change the quality of the nest by setting this slide bar. The far left will favour the speed of the nesting process over the yield, while to the far right it'll favour the yield over the time it takes to process. My suggestion is to start with the option to the far left and increase this as you find your nesting patterns are not quite getting the best fit you believe you need. We'll go over that a little bit more in depth when we cover the nest patterns a little bit later in this course. Common line cutting allows S2M to place parts slightly closer together so it can cut 2 parts with a common edge. This means it'll do 1 pass instead of 2, just like this. Though this is always not the best option, as you'll only ever really get 1 clean edge, as the other will have the router running the wrong way along it. It's okay if you're using very sharp new routers all the time, but it's likely that this option will result in chipping on many parts if you're not careful. While you're getting used to machining, I would suggest making sure this is set to No. At the bottom of each tab section, you'll see an option to save that tab's settings. Clicking Save Now will save everything on that tab, not the other ones, for your default settings. If you just hit OK, it'll work for this time round. However, if you were to leave the S2M Center, come back to S2M, you'll see they've reset back to our defaults. The Trim tab sets how much space S2M will leave from the edge of the sheet to the first parts. This as standard could be set to about 5mm. However, it's best to watch out on your first few sheets what these parts around the edges look like. If you find all your parts were along the top edge and are still getting a lot of chips, you may not be taking enough off to get a clear cut with the router. In this case, you could set a bigger trim to the top and click Save so it's permanent. On top of this, you could also increase a trim for a one-off run if you had a pack of boards, say, that had been damaged on one edge. For example, some water damage, or it had been hit by a forklift. Increasing it without hitting save means we can run the nest with a greater trim size along that one edge and utilize this to save some material. So go back through those options, change what you need to change, making sure to hit that save button as you do. Once you've done that, jump on across to your first S2M quiz. Remember, these quizzes are just to help you memorize the content that you've learnt. They're not timed, so as you're doing them, feel free to jump back into S2M, have a look through the different menus, and just check out and make sure you're really certain about those answers before you move forward. Once you're done with that, come back and we'll go to our very next lesson.